I'll let you in on a little secret. Reaching your revenue goal won't change your life, but hitting your profit goal, that absolutely will. If you want to build a life first business this year, you need to create more margin, both in your finances and in your schedule. If you're ready to double down on profit generating strategies that actually work so you can work 4-day weeks, go on real vacations, or even take the summers off, you won't want to miss this. In my free masterclass, Double Your Profit While Working Less, you'll learn exactly how to set your business up to scale so you can give yourself a raise, create a clear plan for how to work that dream schedule, and step into your CEO era, the one where you and your business aren't just surviving, but thriving. You can grab this free masterclass at www.jadeboyd.co/double your profit masterclass or go to the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
Really diving deep into what is potentially stopping you is something to also consider, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a mom trying to make it work. And I think keeping it simple in any aspect of things, whether it's your schedule, whether it's the things around you, what you say yes to.
Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast, a podcast about redefining productivity for the modern woman in business and finding ways to work smarter, not harder, in business and life. I'm your host, Jade Boyd, an MBA, business minimalist, and productivity coach. I help overwhelmed business owners simplify and scale their service-based businesses by doing less but better. I help my clients create business minimalist strategies and systems that allow them to pursue ambitious goals while working at a human pace. On this podcast, we'll explore simple ways to grow your business with a life-first approach. If you're ready to scale your business, bring order to chaos, ditch the busy work, and spend more time living your life than managing your life, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Brooke.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I am so excited. I was just saying before we hit record, I'm just personally excited to have this conversation with you because I have so many questions and I've heard your story before, but of course I have so many questions digging into all of the reasons why you've gotten to where you are today and just how you've built a life and a business that is so aligned to what's important to you. So for those who are listening and don't know you or your story, would you mind starting off by just telling us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and overall how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I always dreamt of being a physical therapist, owning a women's health clinic. So I followed my dream, as a young child, got my doctorate in physical therapy, and was starting to practice in Iowa, where I lived, grew up, and started having children. Times being a mother definitely changes you. And I was just being pulled and called and trying to listen to my heart to, you're only going to be able to be with these kiddos for, so long. And these are just very important in times in their lives. And so I stepped away from my career back in 2015 when I was expecting our third child. And I did a lot of manual therapy for physical therapy. And so I thought, as a lifelong learner, I'm going to teach myself something new. I mean, I was, busy enough, but let's just add something else
Why
to
not?
the plate. And so I picked up a crochet hook, bought some yarn at the local store, and just started kind of making beanies and donating them to the local children's hospital in central Iowa where we were living at the time. And I was really struggling with going from a medical professional, getting ready every day, having a very structured, strict schedule to a stay at home mom of 3 kids. And so I just want to feel better about myself. I use my new hobby of crochet to make a slouchy hat and throw it on, go drop the kids off at school. And other moms started asking, where did you get this hat? It's so versatile. And I was like, oh, I just made it. You should just open up a shop, sell it, at local events. Iowa has some great outdoor, local events that support small businesses. And so I started Be Happy, which is a play on my name and my married name. And that's kind of where my business started back in 2016, slowly just making beanies when I could with my kiddos. And in 2018, our middle kiddo went to the hospital with a virus that kind of went straight to his lungs. And it was just a very scary situation that, as a mother, you go through. And so he did 9 days in the PICU. And it was just one of those moments that it was we're chasing this end goal, these goals that we have, but we're missing that journey in between. And it was just an eye opener for my husband and I. And so we decided, let's take like this life and let's test out our boundaries and let's really dive into intentional time with our children. So we sold everything in June of 2019 and hit the road. We sold our house, sold our home in Iowa, lived in an RV and traveled the country. And that was in 2019. Like I said, fast forward, I'm running the business, homeschooling, traveling the country, and we just settled down. We got a home base in Texas just like a couple weeks ago, but we're going to still travel part time and really focus on, continuing to travel, show our kids the country and be intentional with this time that we have with our children.
So I definitely want to get into what led you to settle down, but starting at the very beginning, I have to know what was going through your mind at the time that you decided to sell everything. You mentioned it very nonchalantly, like, yeah, we're just going to sell everything and get up and move. But what was that time actually like for you guys? Was that an easy decision to make? Was it hard to deal with others' thoughts and opinions? I'm sure that there were people with opinions. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I think that like our why for this decision to have a health scare with your child and know that life is so fragile, the overall why and the underlying why of like, no, we need this time with our children in the back of our minds was just kind of like, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or
Mm,
says. We know that this is what's best for our family in this season of life. So I think overall, I'd say no, but logistically, we took about a year to be like, yes, financially this would make sense. We'd start homeschooling. And so we took a good year to kind of from the time that happened to when we actually sold everything was about a year to just make sure that we kind of had everything in place. But yeah, I mean, anytime that we felt like we were maybe getting some pushback or people were like, why are you pulling your kiddo out of school? This was 2019. People kind of homeschool was it
mm.
looked at it differently. And so, I think just looking back and saying, no, this is our why. We're doing it for us. And that was kind of the thing that just we always held on to.
I think the other thing that strikes me about your story is that so many people have a moment like that, especially with health scares, whether for themselves or somebody in their family or a kid. And it does cause them to reflect. But I oftentimes see that people really quickly fall into their regular patterns. Like they have that moment of clarity, but then they go
Mhm.
back to life as usual. And I say they, but like I'm the same way, right? I have those moments of clarity where like, why am I doing things like this? Or like, this is really important. And then after that moment, I just slip back into the habit. But you've obviously made a huge life change that has lasted for many, many years. It wasn't just like a 6-week road trip, even like that's a small thing. But how has that kind of changed the way that you think about life and do life overall?
Yeah, I mean, after that, like I said, after that health scare and knowing almost like your why and wanting to figure out that journey of in between, we kind of sat down and said, this is our end goal, but what are our little things that we want to hit in between? And I think that's kind of where the living intentionally and making deliberate conscious
Mm,
choices every day that kind of align with your goals, your values, your beliefs rather than passively just going through your day or always reacting to circumstances. So I just think it's one of those things that every time that something comes about, you make a choice and you can decide which way to go on that, knowing what your goal is, that little teeny tiny step before the big goal or the ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve.
What does it mean to you to live intentionally? Because I do feel like that phrase is something that's thrown out and we don't think a lot about what that actually means. But also, have you always lived intentionally? Is that just a characteristic trait that's always come naturally to you? Or is that a skill that you feel like you've had to build?
I definitely think like motherhood has has changed, that because the phrase "but the days are long, but the years are short" is truly
Mm.
like a reflection of motherhood, and that it's like, I mean, my kids are almost 13, 11, and 9, and it's like I feel like yesterday I was just expecting. So I think just seeing how fast life goes, especially as a mother, is something that you really have to kind of be intentional about and really just make those deliberate choices and say, yes, this aligns with our family or my individual belief. No, it doesn't. And stay true to that versus just going through the motions almost.
What do you feel like has helped you stay intentional for so long? Going back to like we fall into habits and it's so much easier to live by default or do the things that our family and friends or even culture in general expects us to do. But it's really hard to live as like I would say counterculturally as you've been living for such a long amount of time.
I think the one thing is like seeing the joy and the excitement and the feeling that we get when we see new places, do new things. Back when we were considering traveling full time in December of 2018, we're like, let's test out this. Like, what we don't, let's make sure that we want to do this. So we took our camper because we were weekend campers and we took 21 days, went from Iowa down to Florida over like Christmas and holiday break. And I'll never forget the moment that my son, who was 7 at the time, saw the welcome to Florida sign and palm trees. Like his jaw dropped. I got a picture of it and like lives in my mind. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how hard the days are, these new experiences and seeing this expression on his face will be worth,
Mm,
any of those hard days, those bad days, the days where we're in a 40-foot RV and it's raining, because those are the moments, that I'll always cherish. And those are the moments that like literally feels like yesterday, was happening.
mhm,
So I think it's just those feelings and really reflecting on, each day or the moments, that happen that bring you joy. I think, like you said, we get into this vicious cycle of every day is the same or a passive going through the motions type thing. And we are humans and we like that feeling of joy and happiness. And so trying to dig into that and to do more things that bring you joy, I think you kind of build off of that and to be more intentional and, oh, I need to do that because I really enjoy that. It gave me that nice,
mhm.
warm, fuzzy feeling. So I think it's just kind of like really reflecting on what makes you happy and what brings you joy.
Yeah. I love how you pointed out that it's not always easy. Like specifically your situation, I'm sure living in an RV is not always easy full time with so many kids. But also that like living intentionally doesn't mean that everything is all sunshine and roses. When we think of the phrase, it's easy to assume that living intentionally is like the Instagram aesthetic and everything is perfectly serene and it's like your ideal life, right? But when we choose to live intentionally, oftentimes it's like the harder choice, which is why living by default is so much easier. But I would love for you to speak more to like living in an RV and how challenging that must be. How has that challenged your beliefs of like what you really need living in such a small space with limited capacity, but also running a business from that space, which is insane to me. It seems like it would really force you into simple living. So I am curious from like a minimalist perspective, how has living in an RV challenged you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, we told ourselves when we started this adventure, being from the Midwest, we grew up in Iowa, both my husband and I. So we were over the winters in the cold weather. So we told ourselves we were going to chase sandal weather. So for us, that took, I would say, a bit of the stress of worrying about being in a small space
Mhm.
during cold weather. Yeah, we run into to rainy days, we run into the cold, but we do our best to honestly chase 70 plus degrees. So we wanted our kids to almost have a little bit of that like country, whatever the phrase is now, 90s kids where they were just out playing. And so for us, that helped us simplify because we knew we wouldn't need winter jackets. The toys that we did bring were multi purpose. They could get wet, they could be in the sand, they could come inside after they were washed. So I would say for us, knowing that we were chasing warmer weather, that definitely simplified what we needed in the
Mhm.
RV. But yeah, I think it's just focusing on pursuing what you want. We wanted the warm weather. We wanted to be able to be outside with our kids. And so living in a smaller space or living with less, there's just less to worry about, less to clean
Mhm.
up. That doesn't mean that it doesn't get dirty fast. Like it still gets dirty very fast in a tiny space, but I'm not cleaning up 50 toys or it takes 2 minutes for the kids to pick up all their toys. And so, I think it was, like I said, it's one of those things where we knew our why, we knew our intention with it. And so that really helped to be more minimal or not necessarily be attached to like the physical belongings.
Yeah. Which for somebody living in the Midwest, I always think about one of my friends who owns a home organizing business and she's moved states a couple times. And I just remember her saying that moving to Iowa, she's never restarted her business faster because of how much stuff we own in like these gigantic houses. And then people retire, pass away. And it's just so much stuff that we're used to living with. And part of that, I think, is four seasons and needing a lot of things, but also when you don't have a gigantic house and you don't have space for those things and also have a lot less need for a lot of the things to take care of your house, it just makes sense that that would make life a lot simpler and a lot easier.
Mhm.
But it is so hard for us in the Midwest specifically to feel like we need the bigger house. And even Caleb and I have struggled with this, and we have had goals in the past of like, what if we lived in a Sprinter van and traveled, and we're going to have kids? So that Sprinter van is probably out. RV is still on the table. But even thinking about, we have a 1,600 square foot house, but it seems small for having a kid. And then we look at like his sister lives in California and they come to our house and they're like, oh my gosh, you have like a whole second house in your basement. And it's just like the perspective, it makes a huge difference.
Definitely.
I'm also curious, living and like traveling and seeing so many new places. You mentioned that that's kind of your why, and your kids just have benefited so much from seeing and experiencing so many new things and spending so much time outside. I'm curious. I am obsessed with this principle that when you make one small change in your life, it has so many different ripple effects to other areas of your life. And I'm curious how traveling and seeing new places has affected your family overall, because of course it's an exciting thing. It's like a constant vacation. I know it's not like that when it is constant, but what are some of the ripple effects that you've seen, maybe even unexpected things that you've seen in your family or in your health because of your choice to live a little bit counterculturally?
Yeah, I mean, definitely just the time together has strengthened. I mean, if you say like what's your favorite thing, the bond of my children is like I would,
Mm.
you know, there's I can't even like speak on it because it's absolutely incredible. You could give them the whole beach, you could give them the whole playground, acres of a playground, and they'll be right next to each other playing. And that's something, that I think the gift of time, that not only did we give them new experiences and new places, but we gave them time together to build a relationship, because at the end of the day, friends will come and go, but that relationship is important. And so that would like I would say the new experiences and things, they were able to experience that together and they'll always have that bond. But I also think too, just there's something about that joy of doing new things and seeing new places that just is so exciting. Something that puts you out of your comfort zone. It makes you reflect, it makes you learn new things. And so they have also, as a family and also kids have learned new things, they've learned new cultures, they've tried new foods, they've met people. Probably my second most favorite thing is that they're exposed to all different backgrounds of people, of, not everyone RVs, simply because they want to go see everything. It may be, a financial situation that it's almost more of a forced thing. It may be, an unfortunate situation where now they're traveling with a grandparent. There's just so many different reasons for why people are choosing or, are doing the RV lifestyle or traveling. And so they just get a different perspective. And I think it's kind of made them realize that there are a lot of choices in life and that there's not just one path. And they're seeing people work from the road. They're seeing people take a year off. They're seeing people retire early because they just know that life is short. And so I feel like their world has kind of been opened up. So that is one thing that, like, other than their bond, that I'm just so grateful for, and what this travel aspect has done for our family.
Does it still feel new and shiny after having been traveling for so long, to your kids or to you when you're experiencing new things or meeting new people? Is it as exciting now as it was when you were first starting out?
Yeah. Yes. Now that we do have a home base, we will leave like in a couple of weeks and do an RV trip. So I'm interested to see what it feels like. We're all
Mm.
getting a little bit of the itch to get moving and a change of scenery. But yeah, I mean, even when we go, we try not to go back to the same places, simply because seeing new things is great. But there are also places that we absolutely love. And so we do go back to some of those places. But I think every time that you go to a place, whether it's your favorite ice cream shop or something, there's always something that you can take away from it or you learn, about it. And so I think it is all about that perspective and that intention of like, what choice am I going to make today? Even though I've been to this ice cream shop 50 times, I can get
Hmm.
something from this. It's my choice to feel something and to not just go through the motions of get ice cream. Ask about someone's story. Why are they working here? How did the business start? You can just get so many like tidbits and things about life when you are just a little bit more intentional and really focus on your choices and your actions.
Is that something that has always come naturally to you? Because I feel like that's another intentional living thing that is hard to do unless you're really intentional about it, because we do fall into the patterns not traveling. It's even easier, obviously, to go to the same ice cream shop and order the same ice cream and avoid awkward conversations. Like, let's just not talk to anybody or ask any questions. Is that just a way that you've always been, or has traveling kind of opened up that curiosity for you?
I think that it's probably the fact that I've always been like a lifelong learner. And
Mm.
so it's almost kind of transitioned into like, what little piece of information or new thing can I, learn or just consume today. And it's kind of just grown into being the intentional aspect of things. And I think that's probably carried on into my children because they're little like information. They just need to be fed. They will literally go up to anyone and be like, well, why did you start, why did you open this coffee shop? How long has it been open? Da, 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 like, and so, but it's a great thing for them, right? To always want to be digging into information, but it's definitely carried over a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, from a business perspective, I am so curious, especially with a product based business operating in a very small space from the road where your schedule, I'm guessing, is not always predictable. What does it look like for you to balance your business with full time traveling and homeschooling and all of the life side of things?
Yeah, I was very nervous when we moved into the RV because I was like, how is this going to work? But honestly, I think it was for the best because it simplified my business. I kind of made all things, did different things beyond like that were crochet and knit and I just like stopped and was like, what's working? What's making me money? What's my high profit item? And it was beanies. And I just like leaned into the beanies. And so it's one of those things that I'm just really conscious about. It's whatever I bring in, this is what I focus on selling. And then it's just kind of this almost this cycle that I've been able to adapt into. And kind of the same aspect of things when we started RVing, I started the homeschool journey. So it took some time to figure out what works for us. My kids at the time were 3, 5, and 7 when we started traveling. So them helping in the business looked a little bit different than what it does now that they're 13, 11, and 9. But I just try to incorporate them as much into the business as possible. They help package, they might write thank you notes. And so we theme our days. I kind of have, focuses like Mondays always make it Monday. I try to schedule meetings on certain days just so that everyone knows what's happening and what to expect. And when that to-do list is done, we're done working. I'm not going to continue to work just because I have the time. I want this time with my children, and that's a joy of running a small business. So, time blocking, theming my days, and trying to have them help, even though sometimes it's not very, as easy or as smooth of a process as it may be without them helping. I know that that's also time, that we're spending together, and that they're also learning.
So I am also a huge fan of theme days, and I'm curious what your other theme days are other than Make It Monday. How else do you structure your week?
Yeah, so I schedule all appointments and meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays as much as possible. Fridays are my financial days, so I go through inventory, update like my QuickBooks and things like that. Wednesdays I do everything website tech related, and then Saturdays I schedule like plan content, social media type things. But yeah, every like probably 2 to 3 times a year, anytime I feel like we're having a shift in our schedules or maybe our travels are changing, maybe they're doing some activities, I kind of, shift them around and take 10 days to 2 weeks to kind of write down everything, both, personal and business. Like we grocery shop 1 day a week, like just because I feel like you get it done. We're not like, I'm not packaging orders and I'm like, oh no, we don't have any this for, for dinner
Right.
tonight. So yeah, we just kind of really try to plan as much as, fit things into the schedule, because then we all know what's happening and it helps get everything done on the to-do list.
I love it. Like I said, you don't have to convince me. I'm a huge fan of theme days. And I love how all of yours have the same letter, like website Wednesday,
Yep.
financial Friday. Very catchy, very memorable. One thing you said was like, when my to do list is done for the day, then we're done working. And as a small business owner, I think it's so easy to just add more and more to our plate, and deciding when enough is really difficult. Is that something that has taken some like trial and error in deciding when is the to-do list done? Because in theory, it's never done, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that, like, I like to kind of break my business into like the busy season and the slower season, and so trying to work on the back end of things like now, because beanies aren't like aren't as busy right now, but so I just try to get a lot of the busy work done, when I have a little bit more time, and I like to just set a timer. Like if I'm working on SEO, I know I could work on it for hours, but I'm going to set a
Hmm.
15-minute timer. Whatever I get done, I get done. I also like, I'm not going to say I work the system, but I like free apps. Like if I'm going to use an SEO app, I'm going to do as many changes as I can in those 15 minutes. And then it's going to like recrawl my website the next week. And then I'll address those changes. I'm not going to pay for the full version because I know I'm not going to, use all of the different things. So that's what I like to do is like, I'll use a free app and get as much out of it as possible. Once it recrawls my website, then I'll keep working for my 15 minutes, and just it lowers your expenses. It lowers lots of things.
Hmm. So using free software to set limits for you. That's definitely
Definitely.
a hard line. Can't cross that one. I like it. Also mentioning the timer. I feel like of so many business owners that I've interviewed on this podcast, that is the thing that I hear most often when we're talking about productivity is setting timers, which is something that I personally haven't utilized. But the more and more people who say that, the more I'm like, you know what, I should just try it a little bit more
Yeah.
often. But I think that's also the nature of having kids and having like less structure, because right now we're expecting our first this summer, but I do have a lot of freedom and flexibility in terms of how I use my time, and I don't have hard constraints, so to speak, very often. But yeah, that might be one that I have to pick up someday soon.
Definitely.
So, going back to your decision overall to leave like your traditional career and even start your own business, going way back before the RV decision, that is something that I think a lot of women consider when they are starting to have kids. And even as a business owner, even like the situation I'm in right now, I know that business is going to look much different after having kids. Who knows what that's going to look like, but I know it's going to change. And I know that many women after having kids decide to step back or pull back or set, different standards or different growth trajectories for what business looks like. And I think it's something that a lot of women struggle with, because it's hard to feel like you're letting go of something or like failing in that area of your life. And we're told constantly, like, you can do both. Like, you don't have to
Mhm.
decide, just do your best at everything. It's fine. But that's just not the case in the reality. And it's such a hard place to be. And I'm just curious, you made the decision to walk away from your career and start a business. And then again, a really big decision to walk away from your traditional, I don't, way of life. I don't know what else to call it, to travel full time. And I'm curious if you have any words of advice for women who are in that place right now where they are really struggling and feeling like, I don't want to waste this time with my kids that I have right now. I want to make the best use of it, but I also have these big goals for my business and these other dreams in my heart. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously like following your heart is a big thing. I'm a very type A person, so it has to make sense like financially too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like don't go make it like a very rash decision. So, like if it all makes sense financially and you can make it work, then, I was just in my head, was thinking, I know that I can always go back to my career. Like I'll always have my
Mhm.
degree. Yes, maybe times have changed. Maybe the documentation and stuff like that will be different, but I will never have this time back with my children. And so for me that was just like, it doesn't matter how hard the days are that you're home with them or things like that. And I think too, kind of carrying on with like the whole RV aspect of things is that for me, I've always been a firm believer that like if I have a dream or I have this goal, I will sacrifice things to get to that point. People ask like, well, how do you travel full time? Yes, my husband and I still work, but like you make sacrifices to allow for that extra spending or,
Mm.
things like that. Like really, really dive deep into your expenses. And that was one thing when we were looking at like RV life versus home life. How much do we spend each day? We really sat down and looked at the nitty gritty of how much are your TV subscriptions? How much is this? What can we cut? What can we sacrifice? Like, is a Netflix subscription going to be that big of a deal? It all adds up. And so I think really diving deep into what is potentially stopping you is something to also consider, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a mom trying to make it work. And I think keeping it simple in any aspect of things, whether it's your schedule, whether it's the things around you, what you say yes to. If it doesn't bring you joy, like to me, I've always been, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Like
Mm.
if it doesn't bring me joy, I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to feel pressure or like I'm letting someone down, because in the end, it's the 5 people that are in this home that is what's important. And I just kind of, got to put my foot down and know that's what's best. And it doesn't matter what someone else thinks.
There were so many, I could take this conversation so many different ways based on everything you just said. There are so many good nuggets in there. But I love how you talked about getting really practical. But I think that also forces you to ask the question, how could this be possible? Rather than like, of course, that's not possible. We're not going to be able to live full time on the road and homeschool and have a business. Like, that's not reality. But actually
Mhm.
getting curious and writing everything down and being like, okay, if this were possible, how would we make it happen? And I think that's a really hard thing for us to do, even as business owners, like setting general goals. I was just having a conversation with a client earlier today who is struggling with, I don't think that this goal is possible. And it's like, well, how do we change that question? And like, if this were possible, how would we do it? And start getting
Right.
curious. And that's the reason why I really love your story. And I'm so excited for you to share it on the podcast, because we do limit ourselves into what we think is possible. That scope that most of us think about on a daily basis is so, so narrow. And sometimes it does just take asking the questions, what would it look like for me to homeschool my kids and have this business and balance both? What could it look like? And when we get creative, there's so many possible solutions and it's not going to look traditional, but I love that you pulled that out. And it's also very practical. Like you do have to pay attention to how much money you're going to be making, because that is an
Right.
important factor of life. Wrapping up, I hope that some people listening are inspired by this and are going to start thinking outside the box or imagining what their life could look like or what would be possible. And I'm curious, from traveling for so many years, do you have a favorite place that you visited or stayed in your travels? And also, for somebody who does want to experiment or like prototype on living differently, is there an experiment that you would give them? You said that you kind of tested it out when you were starting out. What advice would you have for somebody who is maybe thinking, could we live in an RV?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to like compare all the places that we've been to. I really like the Southwest because for me, you get so many different landscapes. You get the cacti, you get some palm trees, you get the mountains and lakes. So for me, like I love the Southwest. My kids would say New Mexico. My husband would say Montana. So we're kind of all over the place with that.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, for us, we had a weekend camper. So we kind of knew like, okay, there's tanks and there's these things that have to happen in a camper. YouTube is a great resource. Also, like if you're just kind of wanting to test the waters, you can rent an RV. There are a lot of different businesses who will, let's say you want to go to Hilton Head, South Carolina, they own RVs and they will put them like on the RV resort, the spot that you're going to stay at. So you could kind of test it that way if you didn't want to rent the RV and transport it back and forth. And then, yeah, I would say just kind of test it out and see, know that there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. There's no perfect living situation, whether you live in a home, apartment, van, RV, whatever it is, there's ups and downs. I think it's how we approach it and how we, what we reflect on it and then how we approach things. So I would kind of say test it out. I'm a firm believer that like if your heart is calling you to do it, that you only fail by
Mm.
not following your heart. It's, if you sell everything or you take that a 6-month trip and you're like, yeah, that's not for me, then you didn't fail because it didn't last the length of time or that you don't continue. You fail when you don't pursue it. So
Mhm.
just go for it. If you feel like that's something that you're being kind of called to. So yeah, that's what I'd say. Definitely test it out and get an idea what what it's
Yeah.
like.
I might be convinced. Like I said, Caleb and I have been talking about doing something potentially like that. And we have this conversation every winter in like February. We both work from home and have almost complete freedom over our schedules. Why do we live in Iowa again? Like, why are we not traveling long term or something like that? So I might take you up on some of those tips. But also, I realized I forgot to touch on you've obviously now chosen a home base. And so I'm curious what changed or led to that decision for you guys to have the home base? And also, it sounds like you're still going to be going out and traveling, but what did that decision look like or what prompted that?
Yeah, it was definitely when we started this journey, we didn't want to put a time frame on it because we didn't want to feel like rushed or forced into like this adventure. We just kind of wanted to go with what our hearts were telling us to do. So I wouldn't say it was like one thing. We knew and our ultimate goal at the end of this adventure was to have a space or to have land and property that like could kind of, it sounds like cliche, but like be passed on to our kids.
Mm,
Or, we always envisioned growing up in Iowa, like all this land that they would just go and run and be free. So we were always kind of in the back of our minds, like, could this be the place? And we kind of like look around at homes and things like that. But yeah, the kids are getting older. They were doing athletics and sports on the road. We would settle down for a couple months at a time or 6 weeks and they would do an activity. But as they're getting older, there are more restrictions like for the teenagers to be doing things as far as activities, and they're wanting them to be more geographically like committed to, I guess, for activities. So we decided on a home base simply because we want them to still be able to do activities that spark their interest. And so it'll be just like, we'll settle down for the spring and a bit in the fall, let them do their activities and be involved in what they want to do. And then we'll travel those other times. So it's kind of an age thing. We were wanting a sense of no rules, if that makes sense. Every time you go kind of to a campground or even, federal land where you're just boondocking, there's still rules, right? Like
mm,
you had to abide by that and all those things. So it was kind of just a decision that just kind of like happened, as crazy as that sounds. But yeah, we'll still travel and we really want to go international now that the kids are older and it's a little easier versus when they
yeah,
when they had littler legs.
that's exciting. So overall, what is next for you and your business other than, continuing traveling and having this home base, going international? What do you see happening in your business specifically? What are your goals for the future?
That's a great question. I feel like I'm just kind of trying to figure out life like after the past 5 years. Yeah, I think it's going to look a little bit different with us coming and going. I think I'll probably set more limits as far as like when my shop is open, which I
Mm,
have kind of experimented with this summer when we were back in the Midwest, or I guess early summer. I kind of closed my shop, didn't take orders. And then, since we were gone, I don't want to have to take everything now that we have the storage space versus before I had carried all of my inventory. So that's kind of as far as I can kind of look forward is having a little bit of like a more limits to enjoy this time with our kids and this new season of life, and continuing to collaborate with brands, working with brands, creating content, and we'll just see what happens.
I love it. For those who are interested in following along and seeing what happens moving forward and following your journey, where can listeners find you after the show?
Yeah, we kind of share our adventures and life over on Instagram. It's b.e.happy, Happe, on Facebook. And yeah, our website's behappydesigns.com if you want to shop beanies or kind of read our travel adventures. I try to document and help others that want to go to different areas and blog about family friendly things, but it's definitely not a priority right now.
Perfect. We'll link all those things in the show notes. And thank you so much. This was great. I really enjoyed hearing your story. And I'm so excited again to bring this perspective, which is a little bit different than what we've had in the podcast, to more people who are thinking about making a change and maybe a drastic change. So thank you so much again for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Edit podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, tagging me at jadeboyd.co. I'm on a mission to empower a new generation of women to become the types of wives, moms, and business owners that they've always wanted to be. Because empowered women change their families and communities for the better, and this is how we'll change the world. Sharing your takeaways from this episode on Instagram will help more women in business discover helpful episodes and level up in life and business each week. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the tools and resources mentioned in today's episode, because good ideas don't grow businesses. Action does. I'll see you next time on the Business Edit podcast. The number of women burning out is at an all-time high right now, and I'm on a mission to change that. If you're a service provider who's feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid, don't let another year go by staying stuck. The Business Edit is a 12-month group coaching program that helps you declutter your business from top to bottom so that you can have shorter to-do lists, a clear strategy to scale, and know exactly what to focus on each week to drive results in your business. You'll end the year with the business that you've been dreaming of building, one that gives you your life back and pays you more than you ever made before. In the program, you'll follow my signature 5-step method for scaling your service-based business. You'll get business minimalist strategy, marketing, systems, and productivity roadmaps that are simple to understand and easy to implement. Plus, 12 months of customized one-on-one coaching to help you every step of the way. Join me inside the Business Edit at www.jadeboyd.co/coaching and get my step-by-step blueprint with everything you need to build your dream business in 2024. Now back to the show.